Hello, everybody. I'm Gareth. Happy nearly Christmas. It is Tuesday, the 24th of December, 2024. This is the Somewhere on Earth podcast from the Evergreen podcast community. And we're here at the All Is Joy studios in London. And joining me today is Ghislaine for some experting, as I kind of say. Can we even say experting? Is that a verb? It is now.
I think it probably is now.
Okay.
It's good to be a generalist and an expert nowadays.
Yes.
I think you have to really. You've got to
I
keep
think
your
so.
eye on everything as well as know your own area very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can say broadcaster, basically you've been broadcasting on Digital Planet with me for about 1 million years before we even did this, and along with many other things. But more recently, you've been on the BBC as well. Can we give that little plug?
Oh, yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Yes, I just had a BBC World Service show, which came out 2 weeks ago. It's on BBC Sound still. It's part of the series, The Documentary, on BBC World Service, and it's called Me and My Digital Twin. And actually, it's got some quite strong relativity today. Not for the first level is that obviously I wrote it and presented it, but Stephanie is one of my interviewees in it as well.
Oh, so, Stephanie Hare, from who
yes,
we will hear in this programme.
Stephanie Hare, yes.
That's Stephanie Hare.
Who's coming up soon. Plus, we do in the programme cover a certain amount about biometrics, although this kind of deep in dive that we're hoping to do today is needed, actually. It's
right.
Needed.
Okay, that's why we're doing it. Ghislaine, good to be back with you again. And coming up today then, it is a biometrics special, as Ghislaine has more than hinted. So we're talking about facial recognition, we're going on talking about that, and there's a lot going on in the whole space, isn't there? So we will get the latest and why the privacy campaigners are really on the case over a whole load of issues. We're also going to talk about health data in this edition. And there's a trade-off, isn't there? You can harvest lots of biometric data with abandon, and that gives you amazing health outcomes, or you preserve privacy and you hold medicine back. But then, does it have to be a trade-off? Is that really a trade-off? We'll be discussing all that and more right here on the Somewhere on Earth podcast. So we are joined by the aforementioned biometrics expert, writer and general person who knows a lot about this, author. That's the word I'm looking for. Dr. Stephanie Hare, who is author of the book Technology is Not Neutral, a short guide to technology ethics. Greetings, Stephanie. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
All good, thank you. Welcome back to the podcast. And I just wonder if we can start by talking about some of what the UK government is doing. And of course, Stephanie, as you know, we like to pride ourselves on being a global technology podcast. So this isn't just going to be UK-centric today, but the UK is an interesting place to look to for no other reason that the government here is very interested in facial recognition. There is a certain amount of concern. The government says, in its words from its website, it says, enabling the use of trusted digital identity services in the UK, digital identities give people another way to securely prove things about themselves, such as who they are or what their age is, without having to present physical documents. So the second part of all that, Stephanie, sounds completely uncontroversial. It is a way that people can prove who they are. Do we need to question that premise, or can we get beyond that and think about more about what the UK government is proposing?
Do you know what? I worry that I'm having a change of thinking on this topic, so it's good for us to challenge it together. So on the one hand, this country is really different compared to a lot of its European counterparts in that we don't require people to have a national identity card. And the police can't ask you. In fact, on the contrary, you can ask them to show ID if they stop you. So you don't have to prove who you are in the UK. But it is true that we are moving towards, a different kind of world now where things are increasingly being digitized, asking people to keep up with all the different types of ID that you could have, some of which costs money, like getting a driver's license costs money, getting a passport costs money. We don't think that's weird. I have both of those things, and I don't think that the state is violating my privacy. If anything, it would be kind of nice to have all these things centralized as a citizen when I'm looking to prove my ID or have it linked up to all my various things that make me a British citizen. So I'm just thinking about it now and thinking just from a convenience standpoint, fighting identity theft and fraud online, which when you talk to the police, that's one of the biggest things they have to fight. And banks hate it as well, obviously. And I'm sure consumers do. It could be handy for that. And then I just think in terms of where the world is going, is it weird that we're holding out? So I'm challenging myself on this because I travel a lot now, and pretty much every other country has my biometric data, given how much I travel internationally, but not the one I live in,
Yeah.
right? So that's weird.
Yeah, so your fingerprints are on lots of different airport scanners, or at least
And my iris scans. I've had to travel to
iris
the
as well.
Middle East.
Wow.
They've done my face, my eyes, my fingerprints, and you don't have a choice. You just show up at Dubai Airport, and that's it. They've got you. But the French have me as well. And anyone who goes to the United States who's not American, their stuff is all taken, and it's held for 75 years. So just because I'm American as well, I don't have that biometric data stored in the United States, but I do in other countries. So like that's what I mean. My thinking when I wrote my book a few years ago was, I think, from a different time and experience already, just in the, it's been almost 3 years since I published that. My own experience traveling around the world has made me think this is so weird. I'm fighting to protect my privacy in my own country, but I can't protect it abroad. And also, I actually think there's like a digital and identity equality question of, if you can't afford to have a driver's license or a passport, both of which are really not cheap in the UK, does that actually stop people from being able to prove their identity when they need to? Versus if they were given a free identity card that the state just provided that and they could use it for all their stuff, is that not better? Actually, I don't know.
Okay. So far we've been so we talked a little bit about iris, a little bit about fingerprints in the context of traveling, going into airports and entering different countries. That little statement I read from the UK government is really just about the idea of trusted digital identity services. So that little line that I certainly cherry-picked doesn't have anything to do with biometrics. So what I'm wondering from you, Stephanie, and we'll get a response from Ghislaine, is what's the UK saying, if anything, about biometrics? Is it saying now that it's considering having all UK citizens submit an iris scan or fingerprints, or where does biometrics come into this?
So biometrics, like anytime, as I say, with like a driver's license or a passport, the face photograph that you have of your face, that would be classified as biometrics. Already for HMRC, you can opt in. They should never just take it, but you can opt in to do voice recognition, just like you can with private banking if you want to have it through your bank as well. Although, given where we are now with generative AI, it's actually quite easy to fake people's voices and their faces, frankly. So that's the other thing is you're playing whack-a-mole with biometrics and any kind of identity. There's always ways to commit fraud. So we'll have to have a discussion about that, of what is the problem we're trying to solve, and is this the best way to solve it? So no, they're not making anyone do anything at the moment, but what they are saying, there's clearly a push. And it will be a generational push, because right now there's a whole generation of older people for whom this can be sometimes not very intuitive or friendly or easy, and they're not comfortable with it. But you will see this country over time gradually move to put everybody into a digital identity framework, because it is a productivity hack and it's cheaper.
What's your take on this then, Ghislaine? Digital identity and then bringing biometrics into it. Well, as we've heard, the photo is,
yes,
I should have known, of course it's a biometric. But the thing is, just on that, we tend not to think about that. I know facial recognition, if you have to present your face in front of a scanner, but just going to one of those little booths and having a photo taken for your passport, to me, that's never really felt like biometrics, kind of, even though it is.
Yes, it's facial and gait, G-A-I-T, are the main ones.
The way we walk then, yes, the gait analysis.
But just going back a bit, I think Stephanie's really right. We have had this quite pride in the UK for not having to carry around a digital identity card. And I've worked a lot on European projects and worked a lot internationally, and it's come up many times over the last 3 or 4 decades. And the strangeness for other people that we don't have to have that identity card. And Stephanie, I agree with you too. It's potentially not not avoidable any longer, because even for me, I don't have a driving license, and when I'm out and having to identify myself, I have to do it through a credit card or something, or my staff card for university, because I don't have a driving license and I haven't got my passport on me all the time.
So university or say a workplace ID card, but that often doesn't count, does it, in a lot of places, which I suppose is probably your point, given that, I've tried getting into places with my ID card from where I work, my day job, and they'll say, nope, it's got to be either a driving licence or a passport.
Yeah, so, unless you're walking around with your passport all the time, which isn't a very good idea in the pickpocket zones of London and other places too, and you don't have a driving licence, I'm quite often going, but I don't have a driving licence, so I think that's one good point. The other good point is that in some ways there is quite a lot of convenience and seamlessness about actually using unique identification factors such as biometrics, which are our main ones, irises, facial recognition, fingerprints of your known ones, but also gait, motion, heartbeat, breath, etc. These are coming in layers as part of this multi-factor authentication. In some ways, like using your finger, to open your iPad, or using your iris going through passports, they're quick and easy in some ways, and they're quite, they're immediate. You can't forget them, can you? You didn't leave it behind. It's like, and I think there is something there. It's also quite good for people who are neurodiverse, because tapping in hundreds of bits of data all the time and having to upload documents all the time is not so easy. And for many, not just neurodiverse, digital literacy as well, So, and they are unique IDs. That's the most amazing thing about them. And in some ways, that means that we are enhancing our own security, which is the impression that we're being given all the time by these layers coming in. It's for your security, it's for the security of your bank account, the security of your mental health data, your health data, whatever it is, But the problem is the informed consent, and the consent being explicit and agreed between us and those people, whoever it is that's taking it. And I think that's where we go into the issues, not just in the UK anymore. No, this is talking much more globally now about the different regulations there are, which there aren't so many around the world, which actually explicitly say there has to be informed consent from the person that's having their biometric and individual identification markers harvested.
Yeah. So, Stephanie, what does that informed consent look like? I mean, is it literally, it's just as simple as before you, I don't know, have a certain scan of your fingerprint or iris, that they just say, are you sure? Is it as obvious as that?
Well, it's also, they're telling you how they're going to use the data, how it's stored, if they're sharing it with anyone. Is this like a one-time data sharing deal, or are they going to, is it forever? So when you're doing stuff with your phone, like the fingerprint or face verification technology, so you can access your own phone, that's stored as like a mathematical hash, like a mathematical representation. It's not your actual biometric data. Once they've scanned it, they turn it into this hash, and then that's what's stored on the phone. And you're consenting to that, and it's like for you and your phone, right? Versus again, when you go to the Middle East or to the United States, or probably even here, and they're taking your iris, whatever, they might say, we're going to take your biometric data, and you either want to enter the country or not. So there's no informed consent there, because if you say, I would like to withhold my consent, they'll be like, get back on the plane, right? Because that's like the deal. So that's the problem, is that you might be consenting in one context, but not really in another. And oftentimes, the first time that I went to the UAE, I was shocked, because I didn't realize that I had to give this data over. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. I was informed, but I had no consent, and I have no idea how that data is being used, how long it's being stored, anything. But of course, it's true for all non-US citizens who go to the US, they take that data as well, right? So this is an equal opportunity thing for governments, which is interesting. Do you trust a government more than you would a company?
Ooh, depends on the government, depends on the company.
Yeah, it depends which country you're in, doesn't it? Yeah,
that's opened up a whole thing there.
I think going back to the UK thing that you brought up, Gareth, the UK, it's called the Office for Digital ID and Attributes, which is now registering loads of companies and things that allow this kind of use of digital ID. Maybe to actually, it could be as simple as uploading, taking a photograph and uploading a form which has got your picture on it, and then validate, the AI validate, goes, yes, that is the real form. And then you have to upload a picture of yourself there and then and upload that as well. So go, yes, that is the same person. Yeah, within the same, it can be that simple. And that, as far as I understand, they're trying to make that actually, in a way, it's about fragmenting information so that if, for example, the ID that I needed to give was just one bit of information, like, for example, I'm female, I wouldn't have to give them everything else. My address, my name, so it's like, we need to know you're female, so you need to do this, this, and this, and then that's it. They're not going to have every other bit of information about me, and they don't then have to have my fingerprints, my iris, everything else as well. But I don't really know if that's working or not, because it's very new, this.
Right, okay. Well, it is something we will keep an eye on as that eye is being iris scanned. I also want to get your and Stephanie's take on this as we shift away from facial recognition to other biometric data, in other words, health data in this case, and the promise of harvesting it for better diagnosis and treatments. Now, that's at the personal level, but then what if we aggregate all this data at a population level? What about the societal health benefits? And there's a trade-off here, isn't there, between privacy and better health outcomes? Or does it really have to be a trade-off? Then, of course, there's the whole problem of bias. How do you benefit everyone in a society where certain groups might be missing from the databases? Gosh, what a lot to get into in this item then, Ghislaine. And
yes.
Just let's do the easy stuff first then. What are the health benefits then to us as an individual of all our data, health data, being available to somebody or an entity or a company or a health provider?
Well, the main benefits of it being available to you. Yeah, so that's number one, is the individual, whether it's on your Fitbit or on your ring or whatever you're wearing, and blood pressure monitors, all those different things. But of course, it can be aggregated and used, and this is, part of how we got through the whole COVID thing and got the vaccination side sorted out through mass data, actually determining what is needed and what's the best tests or what's the best ways to deal with issues. And that's true for climate change as well. We need all that data to make those big data decisions. It's the kind of data for good movement, But on the individual level, health data is, and I think Stephanie would have a lot of information on this too, it is the data that people worry about the most, the thing that they feel is totally the most private, and also particularly mental health data.
And Stephanie, for obvious reasons, it's data we wouldn't want, for instance, being leaked to insurance companies and so on. So just give us a sense of how personal that personal data is and what concerns you might have.
So I need to be a bit more educated on UK law, but in the United States, where I was born and raised, it used to be that you could penalize somebody for a pre-existing condition. So if they went to go and get health insurance, and they were found to have had a pre-existing condition, they could be denied. And that is, I think, illegal now under the Affordable Care Act, which President Barack Obama brought in. So that used to be a problem, but you can imagine if you had to get testing for something, say, like maybe something's running in your family and you've been recommended by your family doctor that everybody gets tested for it. You want to know that because you need to know if you need to be on medication or having, some sort of care. But if it means that, you can't get private insurance now, that would have been something really scary. And so there's also the fact, like in the United States, the insurance industry is notoriously awful. So what you also have to do is get your insurance basically when you're super healthy, because there's also a cooling off period where you get it and then you can't use the insurance really for like 6 months, maybe 2 to 3 months minimum, because they want to make sure that you're not committing fraud, that you secretly knew you had a pre-existing condition or like quickly got some insurance. So you can imagine, and this is not just your health insurance, it would be life insurance, etc. And it can have massive impact for the rest of your life.
Yeah, so that's in the health insurance model. But what about, say, putting that to one side as well then, the trade-off, or you can tell me if there needs to be a trade-off between giving up, say, a load of your health information in order to get some kind of health benefit, or do you withhold that information and then risk not really having any sort of help or having the right treatment? Just give us an idea of the trade-offs there. And then we'll start with Stephanie, and I'm sure Ghislaine's going to have a thought.
I mean, I think if you are in a situation where you are being told by medical professionals, we need to have this information from you in order to provide optimum care, you're going to hand over that information. And then the question is, you as the patient shouldn't have to be making this call. The healthcare system in your country should be designing data sharing in such a way that somebody is not penalized and, in fact, is incentivized precisely for what we're discussing here, which is that if you're agreeing to hand over your data, and it can be done in a way that's privacy preserving for you, but the whole community, the whole of your society gets to benefit from people sharing data, the incentive should be that you're doing that and you're even rewarded for it, because that's going to advance healthcare and eventually make sure that we all stay healthier, right? So like, that's what I'm saying. This should not be left up to capitalism to solve. This has to, hey, we need top cryptography to protect people's data, and that that exists and can be done. But B, the market incentives have to come from government. They cannot come from the private sector, because the private sector has a different incentive, which is rewarding shareholder value, not keeping you healthy and alive and your family too.
Ghislaine.
Yes, no, I think that's spot on. We are at a very, very bizarre kind of tipping point between this whole thing of privacy and particularly of health data, where it's not just about working out how you can prevent something anymore. You've got something problem with you and you need preventative support. It's actually now, most of it's about prediction. Yeah, so you can, work out, predict ahead what could be possibly happening to you if you don't take certain choices. Yeah. So this balance between private and our own selves and the government or our healthcare systems is at a really difficult tipping point, and I don't know how it's going to go, but there needs to be, as Stephanie's saying, a lot more discussion about it, and I think we need a lot more public education. We can't tell people exactly what the final thing is or the solutions, but at least we can educate people to keep an eye on their data, to secure their data, to make sure they're using it in the right way, not to give it to the wrong people, not to give it without knowing what that deal is in the consent situation.
Yeah. And just before we leave it then, as a final point, but an important one, which is about bias in health data and the number of people, minority ethnicity groups, for instance, and other groups who may be missing from the health data, but also, of course, need to and are entitled to have the same benefits from the data as anybody else. Stephanie first then, how do we get round this problem? Is it as crude literally as going after lots of people who are or not represented at all and literally trying to grab all their data? I mean, it sounds a bit draconian, but is that the only way it happens?
Well, you'll be delighted to know that we actually don't take a lot of health data from half the population, known as women. Because particularly in medical trials, when you're trialing drug treatments, but also just looking to understand conditions, it has been thought that women's hormonal fluctuations throughout the month make them unreliable data subjects. So as a result, you end up having things like doctors being trained to spot what the symptoms of a heart attack are based on what heart attacks are most like in men, which are very different symptoms than how a heart attack manifests in women. So that's a really great example of you think this has nothing to do with women having periods, and yet here we are. The classic widow grabber symptoms of the painful shot up the left arm are much more, for example, typical in men and based on male data than on women, who tend to show things more like flu-like symptoms and exhaustion. So you have women, and this affects their lives. They get sent.
How do we get around that? I suppose if recruiting more women to medical trials might be a start.
Yeah, I mean, and so first thing is admitting that we have a problem. We now know that this is an issue, and thinking, okay, how are we therefore going to start doing sex disaggregated data for a start? So how do you classify male data and biological female data separately and compare them together over the whole population cohort, so that you can see and identify when women have different symptoms for drug or for illnesses or injuries, and also when they need different kinds of medication, because our bodies are not the same. And hormone stuff aside, just in terms of the physics of our body, they're not the same. So I think that's the first bit. And that has to percolate right through, not just to pharmaceutical companies who are developing drugs. It has to percolate through to how we train doctors and nurses and paramedics.
Okay, Ghislaine, final thought.
Yes, I think that's right. And there's another area which is synthetic data, so that we can actually start to make groups of synthetic people, but are of one type, so that we can get more clear personal information to help us as individuals, we're just not being related to a huge mass of people. We're being related to a specific group of, say, women who are 60, who are from a certain culture and nations. Yeah, so they're complex, these things, but there are things working out, and a lot of it's about the design, the inclusivity and the ethics in the base of the design of these data, big data grabs, or big data holds,
All right. And there ends our biometrics special for Christmas Eve. There we are. Thank you very much to Ghislaine, of course, who we've just heard there, and Stephanie Hare joining us on the line, and the lovely people here at All Is Joy Studios for making this sound fabulous, including Eon here doing the sound. And the producer and editor is Anita Rovich. The production manager is Liz Tuohy. I'm Gareth Mitchell. Bye-bye.